I think like the purpose of life is to evolve and learn about yourself, learn about your true nature, and constantly overcome those self-imposed limitations. Alright guys, welcome to this video today. In this one I'm going to be basically talking you through sort of my own personal martial arts journey, like why I got started in training and what keeps me motivated today to keep doing the things that I'm doing. So really it started for me when I was very young, and I used to watch typical superhero cartoons and shows on TV, and they would always have some kind of physical movement and combat in them. The hero would be super agile, and he'd also obviously like be fighting the villains and stuff. And I remember as soon as I saw that stuff, I had a very natural attraction to it, and I was very excited by it, even though I didn't really know what it was. And I naturally began kind of just going out and throwing myself around and trying some of the stuff, like believing I was those characters. And so I didn't really know exactly what that was that I was seeing, I just liked it. And that was until my dad showed me a film that I probably shouldn't have been watching at that very young age, which was Enter the Dragon. And as soon as I saw Bruce Lee moving on screen, this hyper physical guy, super cool and charismatic, that just took it to a new level for me. And then you could say that really sort of solidified my interest in martial arts, and I knew this is like what I wanted to do. And so this kind of like continued, you know, throughout my sort of years growing up and stuff like that. And then I started just being drawn to all things related to martial arts. I was really into fighting games like Tekken and Street Fighter, and they all carried this theme of this physical movement. And then I think at a certain age, I was like 10 years old, I started really wanting to be able to train properly, because before this, like I said, I'd just kind of thrown myself around on the grass outside and didn't really know what I was doing, but I really had this desire to learn properly. And so I tried a few different styles, I won't go into them too much, but I eventually settled on Taekwondo. Taekwondo had the kind of dynamic kicking that I really wanted to do, the sort of more flashier stuff that you could say that you saw in these shows I watched. And so I stuck with Taekwondo, probably the longest I've stuck with any formal classes. I think I did it for a couple of years or something like that, but that was really a good place for me because I met some really cool people there, and I had a group of friends. We would go to the classes and then we would train at my house afterwards, and really kind of got into the progression of it like that. And I think that was just, again, more of these kind of like building blocks upon this thing. I believe everyone has a thing that they're very good at and they're naturally drawn to, and you really should pursue that because it's kind of like connected to your higher purpose. And I think this was sort of compounded by the fact that I quickly discovered I had a very natural talent for the martial arts and sort of progressed past people quite quickly. And I received quite a lot of encouragement and praise from some of the senior members in the club, particularly this guy who I remember called Martin, who was probably about like 25 at the time or something like that, but he was really impressed by me and like gave me loads of words of encouragement and sort of helped me to believe in myself, I guess you could say, and that really helped me. So I always think it's important to really encourage people and kind of push them to pursue something they're good at, because he probably doesn't even remember that time, but I do, because it was obviously very impactful for me. So, you know, if you've got anyone like that in your life, I highly suggest that you encourage them like that. So all of these things kind of really added up, and by the time I was sort of getting into my teenage years, I was very into martial arts, and I'm really grateful for that time, because people at my school, for instance, were like starting to go out and just drink in public and stuff, like in fields after school and that type of shit.
You bunch of fuckers.
And I never did that because I was sort of really focused upon my training, and I just really liked that, and I had my like group of friends and the things we did, and I think that kept me on quite a good path through that time, so that was really good. And that kind of continued throughout those years until I would say I sort of went to university. Kind of being away from home, I guess, like it was a totally new environment, you meet new people, and I fell into what I would consider some bad habits there. All students tend to do this stuff, it's kind of like natural as you're sort of like finding yourself and meeting new people, but I think as somebody who had been into training so heavily, it didn't feel right for me to kind of be doing that stuff, and I didn't realise that at first. Like, this stuff takes a kind of while to realise, and when you've got a habit that's quite bad, it has to get quite bad before you realise it, and then it's actually harder to undo. And I recognised that was the case because I felt like I gained quite a bit of weight that I didn't really like. I wasn't really fat, but I was like much chubbier, and you know, if you've seen any of my content, I'm very small framed and it didn't look good on me at all, and I just kind of didn't feel comfortable in my own skin at that time because I just was so used to this training and it felt very out of alignment with who I was. And again, going back to that gratitude for those years of training and being so into that stuff, it acted as this standard I had for myself. When I would slip out of it, it didn't feel comfortable, whereas I feel like a lot of people do that stuff and they don't even realise they're kind of backsliding a little bit. And I think it was like one summer that I'd come home and and I was getting dressed or something like that, and I sort of caught myself in the mirror, and I was just like, wow, this is not you, and I felt very uncomfortable with myself. It wasn't exactly like a conscious thing, but I think I just had enough of like living in that degenerate manner, you could call it, and I decided I wanted to change it. From that point, there is absolutely a distinct before and after, and like I said, I'd always been into training already. I'd always trained and stuff, like even when I was at uni and kind of like eating that bad diet and drinking and stuff like that, but I hadn't really like taken it that seriously. You could say I was more like a kind of enthusiastic hobbyist. I didn't do all the other things around it, like focus on my nutrition and like rest and everything. But once I made that decision, I really started to take that stuff seriously. And the amazing thing about that is, and why I want to really kind of hammer home on that point is, since that time, like I have never been the same again. Almost like that's become a new standard for me. And anytime I slip even a little bit from that, I kind of like pull myself back up, but it's not done in a self-deprecating way at all. It's like a kind of self-loving way, you could call it. There's very different ways of motivating yourself. Like you can motivate yourself through self-hatred, that you're never good enough and you'll always be chasing this elusive thing that you can never catch, or you can do it through an act of self-love where you feel like you're worth more than you're currently living, if that makes sense. And yeah, so I kind of made this vow to myself that I was, you know, going to change this stuff. And I always had this goal to have kind of like an anime character physique, you know, like a slim sort of really shredded and functional physique. I started learning about working out and nutrition and stuff, and I became really obsessed with it. I'm quite an obsessive person, and when I do something I kind of get really into it, and like as soon as I see results it's very easy for me, you know, to continue doing it. And I did go a little bit too far with it. I got like quite thin at one point, but
you can always be thinner, look better.
The thing that I found so amazing about that was that everything changed in my life from that point. My initial goal was just to kind of lose the extra weight and get back to how I felt comfortable. But what I didn't envision happening was all of the other kind of like positive benefits that I got from doing that you can't sort of foresee, which, you know, is things like feeling way more confident in yourself, and it gives you the belief that you can then do other things as well, which is why I think health is just so important. But the biggest benefit really that came from it was that I realised that I could do something, I could set a goal and work towards something. And I know I trained, like I say, all the time before, but it was never difficult for me to do it. So I don't believe really before that point that I had actually developed discipline within myself and kind of been able to, you know, motivate myself to do something, to work towards a goal. And that's what that gave me there, because it was always very easy. I never really had to work to do it. And so this is something that I am very grateful for, the fact that I did that and was able to, you know, achieve that result, because it's like a skill set that you develop and then you can just put into anything that you want to achieve. And so because of that, this is why I'm now so passionate about, you know, sharing this content, talking about this stuff and trying to inspire you guys, because I always had this idea of being like the people that I was inspired by for a different generation of people, you could say, or just other people in martial arts or in training and stuff like that. And I feel like I'm doing that now with this content and stuff. And it took me a while to sort of like realise what I was about, in a sense, because I know I'm talking about martial arts, but I feel that it's so much more than that. That's just kind of one element of what I about. It's more like becoming just a much more evolved and greater version of yourself, which I know is quite cliche nowadays, but really that's the best sort of description I could say about what it is. And I'm well aware of how important, I guess, that is, because you could on one hand say, oh yeah, just make some content on YouTube, but so many people are so unhappy nowadays and living in that quiet desperation. People are very quietly suffering and they don't really see a way out, and they're just kind of like trudging along through life, and I think that's a really sad state of affairs. So if I can do anything, you know, to help people with that, because it wasn't just the training, it was like it taught me so much about myself, and I felt like I almost like discovered a secret about myself and unlocked more power within myself when I got into training and achieved what I did. And I'm, you know, by no means perfect now. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's like I'm still like going through things now, and like each, you know, different level that you get to comes with its own set of challenges. Training for me is something that's absolutely on lock now, and, you know, health and stuff like that. But making this channel and stuff, as I've spoken about in a few videos before, this has been a new challenge for me to kind of overcome and stuff, and I feel like I'm getting more into my groove with it now. So, you know, this is what it means to be human, basically. I think the purpose of life is to evolve and learn about yourself, learn about your true nature, and constantly overcome those self-imposed limitations. If there's anything I can do, I guess, in this content to help people to understand that, then, you know, I'm doing my job. So, hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I will see you in the next video.